The hailstones struck Caroline's face like frozen bullets as she urged her exhausted mare forward across the Kansas prairie, knowing that if she did not find shelter in the next few minutes, both she and the horse would likely perish in this unexpected summer storm of 1878. The sky had turned an unnatural shade of green just 20 minutes earlier, and before she could even think about turning back toward town, the clouds had opened up and ice began pouring from the heavens. Her mare stumbled, nearly throwing her from the saddle, and Caroline felt panic rising in her throat as she scanned the horizon for anything that might offer protection. There was nothing but endless grass in every direction, and the hailstones were getting larger, some as big as chicken eggs now, bruising her shoulders and back through her cotton dress. She had left Dodge City that morning, with such confidence carrying important documents from her employer at the land office to a homesteader family 30 miles south. At 22 years old, Caroline Miller had worked for Mr. Henderson for 3 years now, ever since her parents had died of fever and left her alone in the world. She was capable, she was strong, she told herself every morning, and she did not need anyone's help to make her way in this wild territory. But now, with hail battering her relentlessly and her vision blurring from pain and fear, she wondered if her stubborn independence would be the death of her. The mare whinnied in distress and reared slightly, and Caroline fought to keep her seat. Blood trickled down her forehead, where a particularly large hailstone had split the skin. She could barely see through the curtain of ice falling from the sky, each impact sending jolts of pain through her body. Her hands were already bruised and swelling, and she knew she needed to protect her head or risk serious injury. But there was nowhere to go, nothing to shelter under, just this terrible exposed prairie and the merciless sky. Then, through the white wall of hail, she saw movement. A dark shape materialized, growing larger as it approached at a gallop, a horse and rider coming straight toward her. Caroline's heart leaped with desperate hope even as caution warred within her. Out here, a lone woman could not afford to trust strangers too quickly. But what choice did she have? The hail was pounding harder now, and she felt consciousness beginning to slip away from the repeated blows to her head. The rider pulled up beside her, and she saw a man astride a powerful black stallion. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that was taking the brunt of the hail, though his shoulders hunched against the assault. His face was weathered and handsome, probably in his mid-20s, with strong features and eyes that held both determination and concern. "You will not survive this out in the open," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "Come here, quickly." Caroline hesitated only a second before urging her mare closer to the black stallion. The man reached out and pulled her from her saddle with surprising strength, settling her in front of him on his horse. Her mare, freed from her rider's weight, immediately bolted in the direction of a line of trees Caroline had not even noticed in the distance. "Wait, my horse," Caroline protested, but the man's arm came around her firmly. "She has the right idea. Those trees will give her shelter. Right now, I need to keep you from getting killed." His voice was deep and calm despite the chaos around them, a Texas drawl evident in his words. "Press your head against my chest." Caroline did not argue. She turned her face into his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt and vest. His arm came up to shield her head further, his body curving over hers protectively as he urged his horse forward. The hail continued its assault, but now the worst of it struck him instead of her. She could feel the impact of each hailstone hitting his back, his shoulders, his arms, but he did not flinch or cry out. He simply held her securely and kept his horse moving steadily toward whatever destination he had in mind. Pressed against him like this, Caroline became acutely aware of several things at once: the steady beating of his heart against her cheek, the smell of leather and sage and something distinctly masculine that she could not quite name, the strength in the arm that held her, gentle enough not to hurt, but firm enough to keep her safe. Despite the terror of the storm and the pain of her injuries, she felt an unexpected sense of security in this stranger's embrace. "Not much farther," he said, his breath warm against her hair. "There is a ravine just ahead with an overhang. We can wait out the worst of it there." True to his word, within 2 minutes she felt the horse descend into lower ground. The sound of the hail changed, becoming less immediate, and when she dared to peek out from the shelter of his chest, she saw they were in a narrow ravine with a rocky outcropping that jutted out above them, like a natural roof. It was not complete protection, but it was infinitely better than being exposed on the open prairie. The cowboy guided his horse as far under the overhang as possible, then dismounted in one smooth motion, reaching up to lift Caroline down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground. Now that the immediate danger had passed, shock was setting in. She was trembling violently, and when she tried to take a step, she swayed. The cowboy caught her easily, supporting her weight as he guided her to sit on a relatively flat rock against the ravine wall. "Easy now," he said gently. "You are safe. Just breathe." Caroline tried to follow his instruction, but her breath kept hitching in her throat. She raised a shaking hand to her face and felt the blood still flowing from the cut on her forehead. Her hands were a mess of bruises and small cuts, and every part of her body ached from the pummeling she had taken. The cowboy crouched in front of her, pushing his hat back so she could see his face more clearly. His eyes were a striking shade of blue-green, like the prairie sky on a clear morning, and they studied her with an intensity that made her heart skip for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. He had a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of dark stubble, and a mouth that looked like it might smile easily under better circumstances. "Let me look at that cut," he said, and before she could protest, he had pulled a relatively clean handkerchief from his pocket and was gently dabbing at her forehead. His touch was surprisingly tender for such a rough-looking man. "It is not too deep. Head wounds bleed a lot, but I think you will be fine. What in the name of all that is holy were you doing out here alone?" "I could ask you the same question," Caroline managed to say, though her voice came out weaker than she would have liked. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. I am a cowboy, miss. Being out on the range alone is part of my job, but you do not exactly look like a cattle hand." "I work for the land office in Dodge City," Caroline explained. "I was delivering documents to the Morrison homestead. The storm came up so fast. I have never seen anything like it." "Summer storms on the prairie can be deadly," he agreed, settling back on his heels to look at her more fully. "You are lucky I was riding this way. Name is James Coltrane. My friends call me Cole. Caroline Miller." She attempted a smile, though it felt shaky. "My friends call me Caroline." That earned her a genuine grin from him, and she felt her stomach do an odd little flip. Even battered by hail and dripping wet, James Coltrane was quite possibly the most handsome man she had ever seen. But more than that, there was something in his eyes, a kindness and a depth that made her want to keep looking at him, to understand what lay beneath that weathered cowboy exterior. "Well, Miss Caroline Miller, I am pleased to make your acquaintance, even under these unusual circumstances." He glanced toward the mouth of the ravine, where hail still fell steadily, but with less violence than before. "We will need to wait here a while longer. These storms usually blow through fairly quick, but we should not venture out until it is safe." Caroline nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going was draining away, leaving her weak and shaky. She hugged her arms around herself, only now realizing how cold she was. Her dress was soaked through, and even though it was summer, the temperature had dropped dramatically with the storm. Cole noticed immediately. "You are freezing." He stood and went to his horse, which stood patiently under the overhang, and retrieved a blanket from his bedroll. Returning to Caroline, he draped it around her shoulders. The blanket smelled like horse and campfire smoke, but it was warm and dry, and she pulled it gratefully around herself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You saved my life out there." "Anyone would have done the same," Cole said, but his eyes held hers for a long moment, and Caroline felt something pass between them, some wordless recognition that this meeting was somehow significant, somehow different from a simple rescue. "Not anyone," she disagreed. "There are plenty of men who would have ridden right past a woman in trouble, or worse." Cole's expression darkened slightly. "Any man who would leave a woman to die in a hailstorm or take advantage of her distress is no man at all. He is a coward and a bastard. Pardon my language." Caroline found herself smiling, despite everything. "I have heard worse language. Working in Dodge City tends to broaden one's vocabulary." "I bet it does," Cole said with a chuckle. He settled himself on another rock near her, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough to be respectful. "Dodge City is not exactly a church social. How does a woman like you end up working in a place like that?" Caroline considered how much to tell this stranger, but something about him invited confidence, and the intimacy of their situation, sheltering together from the storm, seemed to make normal social boundaries less relevant. "My parents died 3 years ago. They had a small farm outside of town, but there were debts I did not know about. I lost everything. Mr. Henderson at the land office took pity on me and gave me a job as a clerk. It is not much, but it is honest work and it keeps me fed. That must have been hard, Cole said, his voice gentle with understanding. Losing your family and your home all at once. It was, Caroline admitted. But I survived. I learned that I am stronger than I thought I was. She paused, then added with a wry smile, though today has tested that strength considerably. You are strong, Cole said, and the certainty in his voice made her look up at him in surprise. Most women would have fallen apart out there, but you kept your head. You kept trying to save yourself. That takes courage. Caroline felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket. When was the last time anyone had praised her, had seen her as anything other than a poor orphan girl making her way in a hard world? She found herself looking at Cole with new eyes, noticing the way his wet hair curled slightly at his neck, the strength in his hands as they rested on his knees, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners as though he smiled often. What about you? She asked, wanting to shift the focus away from herself. Where are you headed? Nowhere in particular, Cole said with a shrug. I have been working cattle drives for the last 5 years, up from Texas to Kansas, sometimes all the way to Montana. The last drive ended 2 weeks ago in Dodge City, actually. I was paid off and decided to take some time before signing on with another outfit. Thought I would ride around a bit, see the country, maybe figure out what I want to do with my life. And what do you want to do with your life? Caroline asked, genuinely curious. Cole was quiet for a moment, staring out at the falling hail. When he spoke, his voice held a note of longing. I want a place of my own. A ranch, not too big. Just enough land to run a few hundred head of cattle. A house with a real roof and walls, not just a bedroll under the stars. Maybe a garden, some chickens, a good horse or two. He glanced at her with a self-deprecating smile. Probably sounds foolish to someone like you, who grew up with those things. It does not sound foolish at all, Caroline said earnestly. It sounds wonderful. It sounds like a home. That is exactly what it is, Cole agreed. A home, something permanent, something that belongs to me. I have been drifting for so long, I almost forgot what it feels like to have roots somewhere. So why do you not do it? Caroline asked. Buy your land? Build your ranch? Money, Cole said simply. Ranch land is not cheap, and cattle drives pay decent, but not that decent. I have been saving, but I am still a ways off from having enough to make a real start. Maybe another year or two of drives, if I am careful. Caroline understood that reality all too well. She had been saving too, penny by penny, hoping one day to have enough to perhaps buy a small shop or boarding house, something that would give her security and independence. But it was slow going, and sometimes she wondered if she would ever get there. The hail was letting up now, the stones smaller and falling less densely. The worst of the storm had passed, though rain still fell steadily. Cole stood and walked to the edge of their shelter, looking out at the prairie. We should be able to head out soon. The rain will not hurt us, and we need to find your horse. Oh, my horse, Caroline said, guilt flooding through her. In her shock and distraction, she had almost forgotten about her faithful mare. Do you think she is all right? Horses have good sense in storms, Cole assured her. She will have found shelter in those trees. We will find her. They waited another 15 minutes until the hail stopped completely, leaving only a steady rain. Cole helped Caroline to her feet, and she was relieved to find that her legs were steadier now. She was bruised and sore, but nothing seemed to be seriously damaged. She tried to return Cole's blanket, but he shook his head. Keep it wrapped around you. You need to stay warm. He swung up into his saddle with easy grace, then reached down for her. Come on. You can ride with me until we find your mare. Caroline took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She had to put her arms around his waist to keep her seat, and she was acutely aware of the intimacy of the position, her body pressed against his back, her hands clasped at his stomach. She could feel the muscles of his torso through his wet shirt, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It felt strangely natural to hold him like this, as though they had known each other for years rather than less than an hour. Cole urged his stallion out of the ravine and back onto the prairie. The landscape looked different after the storm, the grass beaten down, small hailstones still scattered across the ground like pearls. The air smelled fresh and clean, and the clouds were already beginning to break apart, letting shafts of late afternoon sunlight through. They rode toward the line of trees Caroline had glimpsed earlier, and as they drew closer, Caroline saw her mare standing under the branches, looking bedraggled but unharmed. Relief flooded through her. There she is. Cole guided his horse over to the mare, and Caroline slipped down from behind him, approaching her horse with soft words of comfort. The mare nickered and nuzzled against her, and Caroline ran her hands over the animal's legs and body, checking for injuries. A few small cuts, and what would probably be some bruises, but nothing serious. The mare had been lucky. "She is all right," Caroline reported, looking up at Cole with a smile. "Thank goodness." "Good," Cole said. "But you are in no condition to ride all the way back to Dodge City alone, and it will be dark in a few hours. There is a small settlement about 5 miles west of here, called Ashford. Nothing fancy, but it has a boarding house and a doctor. I think we should head there, get you checked over properly, and you can rest for the night. You can return to Dodge City tomorrow when you are feeling better." Caroline wanted to protest that she was fine, that she could make it back on her own, but the truth was that she felt exhausted and shaky, and the thought of riding 30 miles alone held no appeal whatsoever. Besides, she found herself reluctant to part ways with James Coltrane just yet. There was something about him that drew her, something that made her want to know more about this cowboy who had appeared out of the storm like an answer to a prayer. "All right," she agreed. "Ashford sounds good." Cole's face brightened with what looked like relief, and Caroline wondered if perhaps he felt the same reluctance to say goodbye. The thought sent a little thrill through her, though she tried to tell herself not to be foolish. He had rescued her, that was all. He was being kind. She should not read anything more into it. They rode side by side across the prairie, the rain tapering off to a light drizzle and then stopping altogether. The sun broke through the clouds properly now, turning the wet grass into a sea of diamonds. Steam began to rise from the ground, and the air grew warm again. Cole and Caroline talked as they rode, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, their disappointments. Caroline found herself opening up to him in a way she rarely did with anyone, and he seemed equally willing to share himself with her. She learned that he had been born in Texas, the youngest of 5 brothers. His family had a small ranch, but there was not enough land or money to support all the sons, so Cole had left home at 17 to make his own way. He had worked various jobs before falling into cattle driving, and though the work was hard and often dangerous, he loved the freedom of the trail, the camaraderie of the other cowboys, the satisfaction of delivering a herd successfully and earning his pay. Cole learned that Caroline had been teaching herself to read law books, fascinated by the idea of justice and property rights. She told him about the various characters who came through the land office, the homesteaders trying to make a life on the prairie, the speculators looking to make a quick profit, the occasional land dispute that turned ugly. She confessed that she sometimes felt lonely, that most of the women in Dodge City were either married or working in saloons, and neither group had much in common with a respectable but poor young woman trying to make an honest living. "That must be hard," Cole said thoughtfully. "Everyone needs friends, people they can talk to." "I have Mr. Henderson," Caroline said. "He is kind to me, almost like a father. But it is not the same as having a real friend, someone your own age who understands what you are going through." "No," Cole agreed. "It is not the same." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I know what you mean about being lonely. On the trail I'm surrounded by other cowboys, but most of them are older or younger. And we do not have much in common beyond the work. When the drive ends and everyone goes their separate ways, I am on my own again. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have someone to share things with. Someone who really knows you." Caroline looked at him, at his profile against the endless sky, and felt her heart squeeze with an emotion she was almost afraid to name. In the space of a few hours, this man had become more real to her than people she had known for years. There was a connection between them, something deeper than gratitude or physical attraction, though she felt both of those things as well. It was as though they recognized something in each other, some shared loneliness or longing that made them kindred spirits. They reached Ashford as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The settlement was small, just a handful of buildings clustered around a dusty main street, but it looked welcoming after the ordeal of the storm. Cole led them to the boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure with a porch across the front, and cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. The landlady, a plump woman named Mrs. Guthrie, took one look at Caroline's battered face and blood-stained dress, and immediately swept into action. She showed Caroline to a small but clean room upstairs, helped her out of her wet clothes, and brought warm water for washing. While Caroline cleaned up and changed into a spare dress, Mrs. Guthrie provided, the landlady sent her husband to fetch the doctor. The doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes and gentle hands, examined Caroline thoroughly. He cleaned and bandaged the cut on her forehead, applied salve to her bruises, and pronounced that she was remarkably lucky. No broken bones, no signs of serious injury, just bruising and shock that would heal with rest. He left some powder for pain and instructed Caroline to stay in bed for the rest of the evening. When he had gone, Mrs. Guthrie brought a tray of soup and bread, and Caroline ate hungrily, only now realizing how famished she was. As she ate, she asked, "The man I came in with, Mr. Coltrane, is he still here?" "Oh, yes, dear, Mrs." Guthrie said with a knowing smile. "He took a room as well. He has been downstairs pacing like a caged cat, waiting to hear how you are. Shall I tell him he can come up and see you for a few minutes? I know it is not strictly proper, but under the circumstances, I think we can bend the rules a bit." Caroline felt her cheeks warm, but she nodded eagerly. "Yes, please. I would like to thank him properly." Mrs. Guthrie left, and a few minutes later there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Caroline called, and Cole entered, hat in hand, looking uncertain. He had cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved, his hair still damp and combed back. He wore a clean shirt, and Caroline thought he looked even more handsome than he had on the prairie, if that was possible. His eyes went immediately to the bandage on her forehead, and concern shadowed his features. "How are you feeling?" he asked, staying near the door as though afraid to presume too much. "Much better," Caroline assured him. "Thanks to you. If you had not found me when you did, I do not know what would have happened." "I am just glad I was there," Cole said simply. He hesitated, then took a few steps into the room. "Mrs. Guthrie said the doctor thinks you will be fine, just need some rest." "That is what he said," Caroline confirmed. She patted the edge of the bed, inviting him to sit. "Please, come in properly. I do not bite." Cole smiled at that and crossed the room, settling carefully on the edge of the bed, still holding his hat. Up close, Caroline could see that he had a few bruises of his own from the hail, a darkening mark on his cheekbone, and his hands showing signs of the battering he had taken while protecting her. "You are hurt, too," she said, reaching out to touch the bruise on his face before she could think better of it. Her fingers brushed his cheek, and she felt him go very still beneath her touch. "I am sorry. You took the worst of the storm because of me." "It is nothing," Cole said, but his voice had gone rough. "Caroline, He trailed off, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "What is it?" Caroline asked softly, her hand still resting against his face. Cole turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know we only just met today. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I cannot shake the feeling that finding you out there in that storm was not just chance. It was meant to be. Like the universe or God or whatever is out there put me in exactly the right place at the right time, not just to save you, but to meet you." Caroline's heart was pounding now, so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I feel that too," she whispered. "I have never believed in fate or destiny before, but today I do not know. Something happened out there, something more than just a rescue." Cole reached up and covered her hand with his, pressing her palm more firmly against his cheek. "I am not good with words," he said. "I am just a cowboy who has spent most of his life sleeping on the ground and eating dust. But I know what I feel, and I feel something for you. Caroline, something strong and real and terrifying." "It terrifies me too," Caroline admitted, "but it also feels right. More right than anything has felt in a very long time." They stared at each other for a long moment, and then, as though drawn by a force neither could resist, they leaned toward each other. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question asked and answered, but then Cole's free hand came up to cup the back of her head, mindful of her injuries, and the kiss deepened, became something urgent and hungry, as though they were both starving for this connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caroline felt dizzy, and she knew it had nothing to do with her injuries. Cole rested his forehead against hers, careful not to press on her bandage, and they stayed that way for several heartbeats, just breathing together. "I should go," Cole said reluctantly. let you rest. But Caroline, I need to know. When you go back to Dodge City tomorrow, can I come with you? Can I see you again? Because I do not think I can just ride away and never see you again. Yes, Caroline said without hesitation. Yes, please come with me. I want to see you again. I want to see where this goes. The smile that spread across Cole's face was like the sun coming out after a storm. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, then stood. Get some rest. I will be right downstairs if you need anything. Anything at all. I will, Caroline promised. Good night, Cole. Good night, Caroline. After he left, Caroline lay back on the pillow, her fingers touching her lips where she could still feel the pressure of his kiss. Her body ached, her head throbbed, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Something had changed today, something fundamental and profound. She had ridden out this morning as one person, alone and independent, and she was coming back tomorrow as someone different, someone who had found an unexpected connection in the most unlikely of circumstances. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of blue-green eyes and strong arms and a voice that said she was brave. The next morning, Caroline woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up from downstairs. Her body was stiff and sore, but the rest had done her good. She dressed carefully in her own clothes, which Mrs. Guthrie had cleaned and dried overnight, and made her way downstairs to the dining room. Cole was already there, sitting at a table with a cup of coffee in front of him. His face lit up when he saw her, and he stood immediately pulling out a chair for her. "Good morning. How do you feel?" "Sore," Caroline admitted, "but much better than yesterday. How about you?" "Right as rain," Cole assured her, though she could see he moved a bit stiffly himself. They shared a conspiratorial smile, remembering the storm and their shelter in the ravine and everything that had followed. Mrs. Guthrie served them a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy, and they ate with good appetite. As they ate, they made plans for the day. They would ride back to Dodge City together, a journey that would take most of the day at an easy pace. Caroline would need to report to Mr. Henderson and explain what had happened, and she would also need to make arrangements to complete the delivery of the documents to the Morrison homestead, though that could wait a day or two. "What will you do once we get to Dodge?" Caroline asked Cole. "Do you have plans?" Cole shrugged. "Not really. I was just drifting, remember? But now, well, I am thinking maybe I will stay in Dodge City for a while, see if I can find some work, spend some time getting to know a certain land office clerk, if she is amenable to the idea." Caroline felt warmth spread through her chest. She is very amenable to the idea. They set out mid-morning, their horses refreshed and their spirits high despite the soreness from the previous day's ordeal. The prairie looked different after the storm, washed clean, the colors more vivid. They rode at an easy pace, talking and laughing, and occasionally Cole would reach over and take Caroline's hand, twining their fingers together as they rode side by side. It felt natural, Caroline thought. It felt like something that had been waiting to happen, and now that it had begun, it was simply unfolding the way it was meant to. She had always been practical, not given to romantic fancies, but she could not deny what she felt when she looked at Cole, when he looked at her. This was real. This was something worth pursuing. They reached Dodge City in the late afternoon, riding down Front Street past the saloons and shops and the railroad depot. Caroline led Cole to the land office, where Mr. Henderson was just closing up for the day. The older man's face went pale when he saw Caroline's bandaged forehead and bruised hands. "Good Lord, Caroline, what happened to you?" he demanded, ushering her inside and looking her over with paternal concern. Caroline explained about the storm, carefully editing out some of the more personal details of her rescue and the time spent with Cole. She introduced Cole as the man who had saved her life, and Mr. Henderson shook his hand with genuine gratitude. "I owe you a debt, Mr. Coltrane," he said seriously. "Caroline is like a daughter to me. If anything had happened to her, I do not know what I would have done." "No debt needed," Cole said. "I am just glad I was there." Mr. Henderson insisted that Caroline take the next few days off to recover, and he told her not to worry about the Morrison documents. He would arrange for someone else to deliver them, or wait until she was feeling better. Caroline thanked him, touched by his kindness, and promised to rest. As they left the land office, Cole asked, "Where do you live? Let me walk you home." Caroline hesitated. She rented a tiny room above a seamstress shop, barely big enough for a bed and a washstand, and she felt suddenly embarrassed for Cole to see how small and shabby her life was. but he had been honest with her about everything, and she owed him the same honesty. "It is not much," she warned as she led him down a side street. "Just a room, really." "I have been sleeping on the ground for the last few months," Cole reminded her with a grin. "I am not exactly in a position to judge anyone's accommodations." Her room was indeed small, but it was clean and neat, with a quilt her mother had made on the bed and a few precious books on a shelf. Cole looked around with interest, not judgment, and Caroline felt herself relax. "It is cozy," he said. "It suits you?" "Where will you stay?" Caroline asked. "Most of the hotels in town are not very nice, and the good ones are expensive." "I will find something," Cole said easily. "Do not worry about me. But Caroline, before I go, I need to ask you something." He took both her hands in his, looking down at her with those remarkable eyes. "I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I cannot ignore what I feel. I want to court you properly if you will let me. I want to take you to dinner, walk with you, spend time with you. I want to see if what we felt yesterday is real, if it can grow into something lasting." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I want that too," she said. "I want all of that." Cole smiled, and then he was kissing her again, right there in her tiny room, and Caroline kissed him back with all the feeling in her heart. When they parted, both were breathless, and Cole rested his forehead against hers in the gesture that was already becoming familiar. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Let you rest, but I will come by tomorrow if that is all right. We can have dinner together." "That is more than all right," Caroline said. "That is perfect." After Cole left, Caroline sat on her bed, her fingers once again touching her lips, marveling at how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been alone, independent, expecting nothing from life but hard work and solitude. Now she had met a man who made her heart race, who looked at her like she was precious, who wanted to build something real with her. It felt like a miracle, a gift from a universe that had taken so much from her, but was finally giving something back. Over the next few weeks, Cole and Caroline saw each other nearly every day. Cole found work at one of the stockyards on the edge of town, loading cattle into rail cars, and though the work was hard and the pay modest, it was steady. He rented a room in a boarding house not far from Caroline's, and they fell into a comfortable routine of meeting for meals, walking together in the evenings, and talking for hours about everything and nothing. Caroline found herself falling deeper in love with him with each passing day. She loved the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as though her words mattered. She loved his sense of humor, the way he could make her laugh even when she was tired or discouraged. She loved his quiet strength, the way he carried himself with confidence, but without arrogance. She loved the way he looked at her, as though she was the most beautiful and fascinating woman in the world. Cole was equally smitten. He had never met a woman like Caroline, so smart and capable yet vulnerable in ways that made him want to protect her. He loved her courage, the way she had survived loss and hardship and come out stronger. He loved her kindness, the way she spoke gently to her horse and smiled at children on the street. He loved the way she challenged him, asking questions about his life and his dreams, pushing him to think about what he really wanted. And he loved the way she responded to his kisses, with a passion and sweetness that made his head spin. They talked about the future, tentatively at first, and then with growing confidence. Cole spoke about his dream of owning a ranch, and Caroline found herself imagining what it would be like to build that life with him. She could see it so clearly. A house on the prairie, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers, children playing in the yard. It was a dream she had not even known she had, but now that she could envision it, she wanted it with an intensity that surprised her. One evening, about 6 weeks after the storm, Cole took Caroline to dinner at the best restaurant in Dodge City. It was a special occasion, he said, though he would not tell her what they were celebrating. Caroline wore her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and Cole wore a new shirt and vest that he must have bought especially for the occasion. They ate steak and potatoes, drank wine, and talked and laughed as they always did. But Caroline could sense that Cole was nervous about something, that he had something on his mind. After they finished eating, he reached across the table and took her hand. "Caroline, there is something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. "I have been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks about what I want, about where I am going, and I have come to a decision." Caroline's heart was pounding. "What kind of decision?" I have been saving money for years to buy my own ranch, Cole said. I have almost enough now, especially with the money I have been making at the stockyard. And I found a piece of land about 20 miles north of here, near a town called Cimarron. It is not big, just a quarter section, but it has good grass, a creek running through it, and a small house that needs some fixing up, but is livable. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price, and I think I can swing it if I am careful. Cole, that is wonderful, Caroline said, genuinely happy for him, but her heart was sinking. If he bought land near Cimarron, he would leave Dodge City. He would leave her. Cole squeezed her hand. Here is the thing. I do not want to do this alone. I know we have not been courting long, and maybe this is too soon. Maybe I am being a fool. But Caroline, I love you. I think I loved you from the moment I pulled you onto my horse in that hailstorm, and I cannot imagine building a life out there without you beside me. He paused, his eyes searching hers. I am asking you to marry me. Be my wife. Help me build this ranch, this home, this life. I promise I will work hard to make you happy. I promise I will love you every day for the rest of my life. Caroline could not breathe. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Cole, I will marry you. I love you too. I have been so afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon, but I do. I love you so much. Cole was around the table in an instant, pulling her to her feet and kissing her right there in the restaurant, not caring who saw. Caroline kissed him back, laughing and crying at the same time, and when they finally pulled apart, the other diners were applauding. They were married 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Dodge City. Mr. Henderson walked Caroline down the aisle, tears in his eyes, and Mrs. Guthrie came all the way from Ashford to stand as Caroline's witness. A few of Cole's friends from the stockyard attended, and the church was filled with wildflowers that Cole had picked himself. Caroline wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Cole wore his best suit, and when they said their vows, their voices were steady and sure. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at the boarding house where Caroline had been living. Mrs. Harmon, the landlady, had made a cake, and there was lemonade and sandwiches, and everyone toasted the happy couple. Mr. Henderson pulled Caroline aside at one point, his eyes serious. "Are you sure about this, my dear?" he asked. "It is a hard life, ranching. You will be isolated, far from town. It will not be easy." "I am sure," Caroline said firmly. "I love him, Mr. Henderson, and I want to build this life with him. I am not afraid of hard work." "No, you never have been, Mr." Henderson agreed with a smile. "You are a remarkable young woman, Caroline. I am so proud of you." He pressed an envelope into her hand. "A wedding gift. It is not much, but I hope it will help you get started." Caroline opened the envelope and found a deed to a small piece of land adjacent to the property Cole had purchased. "Mr. Henderson, I cannot accept this. It is too much." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "That land has been sitting empty for years. I bought it as an investment, but I have no use for it. I would rather see it go to you and Cole to help you build your ranch. Consider it a thank you for all the years you worked for me, and a wedding gift." Caroline hugged him tightly, overcome with gratitude. Thank you so much." 2 days later, Caroline and Cole loaded their meager belongings into a wagon Cole had bought and set out for their new home. The journey took most of the day, but neither of them minded. They talked and laughed, making plans for their future. And when they finally crested a rise and saw their land spread out before them, Caroline felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The house was small, just 2 rooms really, but it had a good roof and solid walls. The creek babbled nearby, and the grass stretched out in every direction, golden in the late summer sun. Cole lifted Caroline down from the wagon and into his arms, carrying her over the threshold of their new home, and they both laughed at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Coltrane," Cole said, setting her gently on her feet. "Home," Caroline repeated, and the word tasted sweet on her tongue. "Yes, this is home." The first few months were indeed hard, just as Mr. Henderson had warned. Cole worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, building a barn, buying a small starter herd of cattle. Caroline worked just as hard, tending a garden, cooking, sewing, and helping Cole with the ranch work whenever she could. She learned to ride better, to rope and brand, to deliver a calf when the mother was having trouble. Her hands, which had been soft from office work, grew calloused and strong, her skin tanned from hours in the sun. But she had never been happier. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie. Cole would put his arm around Caroline, and she would lean against his chest, and they would talk about the day, about their hopes, about the life they were building together. Sometimes they would not talk at all, just sit in comfortable silence, content to be near each other. Their love deepened and matured as the months passed. The initial rush of passion settled into something steadier, but no less intense, a love built on mutual respect and partnership and genuine affection. They had their disagreements, of course, as all couples do, but they learned to talk through their problems, to compromise, to forgive. Caroline learned that Cole could be stubborn when he thought he was right, but he was always willing to listen to her perspective. Cole learned that Caroline had a temper when pushed too far, but she was quick to apologize and make amends. Winter came, and it was harsh. The wind howled across the prairie, and the temperature dropped below zero. They huddled close in their small house, grateful for the good roof and the thick walls Cole had reinforced. Caroline cooked hearty stews and baked bread, and Cole made sure the livestock were sheltered and fed. It was hard, but they faced it together, and somehow that made it bearable. Spring brought new life. The grass turned green, wildflowers bloomed, and their small herd of cattle thrived. But the most exciting news came in April, when Caroline confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks. She was pregnant. Cole was over the moon with joy, picking her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests that he would make her dizzy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A real family." "Yes," Caroline agreed, her hands on her still flat stomach. "A family." Cole became even more protective of her after that, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, though Caroline insisted she was perfectly capable. They compromised, with Caroline handling the lighter chores and Cole taking on more of the physical labor. As summer progressed and Caroline's belly grew, they talked endlessly about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they were creating for their child. The baby was born in late September, a healthy boy with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair. They named him Samuel after Cole's father and called him Sam. Cole held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face, and Caroline had never loved him more than she did in that moment, seeing the gentle way he cradled their child. The years that followed were a mixture of hard work and deep joy. Sam grew into a bright, energetic toddler, always underfoot, always asking questions. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Cole's herd grew, and they were able to hire a couple of hands to help with the work. Caroline's garden flourished, and she began selling vegetables and eggs to the general store in Cimarron, bringing in extra income. 2 years after Sam was born, they had another child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Caroline's mother. Elizabeth was quieter than her brother, but equally curious, and she followed Caroline everywhere, learning to cook and sew and tend the garden. Cole doted on his daughter shamelessly, and Sam appointed himself her protector, taking his role as big brother very seriously. By the time Sam was 10 and Elizabeth was 8, the ranch was firmly established. They had expanded their holdings with the land Mr. Henderson had given them, and Cole's dream of a modest but successful operation had become reality. The little 2-room house had been expanded into a proper home with 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and even a parlor with a fireplace. Caroline had curtains in the windows and a rug on the floor, small touches that made the house a home. One evening in the summer of 1890, Caroline sat on the porch with Cole, watching Sam and Elizabeth play tag in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. Caroline leaned against Cole's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, a gesture as familiar and comfortable as breathing. "Do you ever think about that day?" Cole asked quietly. "The day we met." "All the time," Caroline admitted. "I think about how scared I was, how much the hail hurt, how desperate I felt. And then I think about you riding out of the storm like some kind of hero from a story. I think about how you told me to press my head against your chest, and how safe I felt in that moment, even though I did not even know your name. I think about it too," Cole said. "I think about how small you looked on that horse, trying so hard to be brave. I think about how right it felt to protect you, to hold you close. I think about how I knew, even then, that you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives, Caroline said. We built this life together. Yes, we did, Cole agreed. He kissed the top of her head. And I would not change a single thing. Well, except maybe I wish that storm had not hurt you so badly. Caroline laughed. It was worth it. Every bruise, every cut, all of it. Because it brought me to you. Sam came running up to the porch, breathless and laughing. Ma, Pa, Elizabeth says I cannot catch her, but I almost did. Tell her I'm fast. You are very fast, Cole assured his son with a grin. But your sister is crafty. She knows how to outmaneuver you. Elizabeth appeared behind her brother, equally breathless. Can we have cookies, Ma, please? After supper, Caroline said firmly. Go wash up, both of you. The children scampered off, still arguing good-naturedly about who had won their game. Caroline and Cole exchanged a fond look, the kind of look that only parents who genuinely love their children and each other can share. We did good, Cole said softly. Look at them. They are happy and healthy and loved. We gave them the kind of home we both wanted. We did, Caroline agreed. We really did. As the years continued to pass, the Coltrane Ranch became known throughout the region for its quality cattle and the integrity of its owners. Cole's reputation as a fair and honest rancher meant that he had no shortage of buyers for his stock, and the family prospered. They weathered droughts and hard winters, dealt with rustlers and the occasional dispute with neighbors, but they faced every challenge together, as partners. Sam grew into a tall, strong young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. He had Cole's steady temperament and Caroline's quick mind, and it was clear that he would one day take over the ranch and run it well. Elizabeth grew into a lovely young woman with her mother's compassion and her father's determination. She loved the ranch, but also had a passion for teaching, and when she was 18, she went to Dodge City to attend a teaching school there, with her parents' full support. Caroline and Cole aged gracefully together, gray threaded through Cole's dark hair, and lines appeared around his eyes. But Caroline thought he was more handsome at 45 than he had been at 25. Her own hair lightened with silver, and her hands bore the marks of a life of hard work, but she wore these signs of age with pride. They were evidence of a life well lived, a life filled with purpose and love. One spring day when Caroline was 44 and Cole was 47, they rode out to the spot where Cole had first brought her after they bought the ranch, the rise where they had looked down at their future home for the first time. They still rode out here occasionally, just the two of them, to remember where they had started and to appreciate how far they had come. They stood side by side, looking out over the ranch that they had built with their own hands and their own determination. The house stood solid and welcoming. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. It was everything they had dreamed of, and more. Do you remember standing here that first day? Cole asked, taking Caroline's hand. Do you remember how scared we both were? How uncertain? I remember, Caroline said. I remember thinking that it looked like such a big job, such an impossible dream. But you were so confident. You made me believe we could do it. We did it together, Cole reminded her. I could not have built any of this without you. You are my partner, Caroline. You always have been. My partner and my love and my best friend. Caroline turned to face him, reaching up to cup his weathered cheek. And you are mine. You saved my life that day in the hailstorm, Cole. But you did more than that. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose, a family. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed. Cole pulled her close, holding her against his chest, just as he had that day so long ago during the storm. Caroline pressed her head against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and she felt the same sense of safety and rightness that she had felt then. Some things never changed, some things were meant to last forever. I love you, Cole murmured into her hair. I have loved you from the first moment I saw you fighting against that storm. I will love you until my last breath. I love you too, Caroline whispered, always. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other by chance and built a life by choice. The prairie wind blew around them, warm and gentle, carrying the promise of another good season ahead. As they finally turned to ride back to the house, back to the life they had created together, Caroline thought about how strange and wonderful fate could be, how a terrible storm had brought her the greatest blessing of her life, How being caught in the open with nowhere to hide had led her to the one place she truly belonged, in Cole's arms, in his heart, in the life they had built together. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Sam was there with his new wife, a sweet girl named Anna from Cimarron. Elizabeth had come home for a visit from Dodge City, full of stories about her students. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with laughter and conversation and the warmth of people who loved each other. After dinner, after the children had left and Caroline and Cole were alone again, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The stars were coming out, bright and clear in the prairie sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of the garden Caroline tended so carefully. "This is what I always wanted," Cole said, his arm around Caroline's shoulders. "This exact thing, a home, a family, someone to share it all with. You gave me this, Caroline." "We gave it to each other," Caroline corrected gently. "That is what partnership means. We each brought something to this, and together we created something neither of us could have built alone." Cole nodded, accepting the truth of that. "You are right, as usual." He kissed her temple. "What would you say if I told you I have been thinking about retiring, letting Sam take over more of the daily running of the ranch? We have worked hard for all these years. Maybe it is time to take things a bit easier, enjoy the fruits of our labor." Caroline considered that. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. We have earned the right to slow down a bit, and Sam is more than ready to take on more responsibility. But what would we do with all that free time?" "Well," Cole said thoughtfully, "I thought maybe we could travel a bit, see some of the country beyond Kansas, maybe visit Elizabeth and Dodge City more often, spend time with our grandchildren when they come along. And I have a feeling they will come along soon, the way Sam and Anna have been looking at each other." "Grandchildren," Caroline said with a smile. "That sounds wonderful. And yes, I would like to travel. I would like to see the ocean someday, and the mountains. There is so much of the world I have never seen." "Then we will see it," Cole promised. "Together, just like we have done everything else." They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts but comfortable in the presence of the other. Finally, Cole spoke again, his voice soft and reflective. "You know, people sometimes ask me if I have any regrets, and I can honestly say I do not have a single one. Oh, there are things I would have done differently if I had known more at the time, ways I could have been smarter or more efficient. But regrets? No, because every choice I made, every path I took, led me to you, and that makes everything worthwhile." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I feel the same way. My life has not always been easy. I lost my parents, I struggled, I faced hard times. But it all led me to that prairie on that stormy day, to you coming out of the hail like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Cole Coltrane. You and the life we have built together." They kissed then, a long, sweet kiss that held all the love and tenderness of more than 20 years together. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The years continued to unfold in the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. True to their plans, Cole and Caroline gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Sam, who ran the place with skill and dedication. They did travel, making trips to Colorado to see the mountains, to California to dip their toes in the Pacific Ocean, and frequently to Dodge City to visit Elizabeth, who had married a banker and started her own family. Caroline and Cole became grandparents, first to Sam and Anna's twin boys, then to Elizabeth's daughter, and then to several more grandchildren over the years. They doted on all of them, spoiling them just enough to make them feel special, but not so much as to make them unmanageable. The ranch house was often filled with the sound of children's laughter, and both Caroline and Cole agreed that these were some of the happiest days of their lives. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Caroline with a gift. He had commissioned a local artist to create a painting based on a story Cole had told him. The painting showed a prairie landscape under a stormy sky, with hail falling, and a cowboy on a black horse holding a woman in his arms, sheltering her from the storm. Caroline cried when she saw it. "It is beautiful. It is perfect. It is us. It is where we began," Cole said, holding her close. "I never want to forget that day, that moment when I found you and knew my life was about to change forever." They hung the painting in their bedroom, where they could see it every day, a reminder of how they had met and how far they had come together. As they moved into their 60s, Cole and Caroline slowed down even more, but they never lost their zest for life or their love for each other. They took walks every day hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. They still kissed goodnight every evening and good morning every day, small rituals of affection that had become the bedrock of their relationship. One evening, when Caroline was 66 and Cole was 69, they sat on the porch as usual, watching the sun set over the prairie they had called home for more than 4 decades. Cole was quieter than usual, and Caroline sensed he had something on his mind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. Cole was silent for a moment, then said, "I was thinking about how lucky I am, how improbable this all is. What were the chances that I would be riding across that particular stretch of prairie on that particular day when you needed help? What were the chances that we would fall in love so quickly, so completely? What were the chances that it would last, that we would build all of this together? I do not think it was chance," Caroline said thoughtfully. "I think it was fate. I think we were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. Nothing else makes sense." "You are probably right," Cole agreed, "and I am grateful for it every single day. Caroline, you are the love of my life. You know that, right? You have made every day an adventure, every challenge bearable, every joy brighter. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you." "And I cannot imagine my life without you," Caroline said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You are my everything. Cole, my hero, my partner, my love. You always have been. You always will be." They held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear. They had held each other through storms, both literal and figurative, through hard times and good times, through sickness and health. They had kept their wedding vows in every way that mattered, not because it was easy, but because they had chosen each other every single day for more than 4 decades. The years continued to pass, gentle and sweet. Sam ran the ranch with his sons, who were growing into capable young men. Elizabeth's children visited often, bringing life and laughter to the house. Caroline's garden continued to flourish, though she let her grandchildren do more of the heavy work now. Cole still rode out to check on the cattle sometimes, though he moved more slowly and tired more easily. On a warm spring day in 1916, when Caroline was 70 and Cole was 73, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. The family gathered for a big party, with food and music and dancing. Caroline and Cole danced together slowly, holding each other close, and everyone who saw them could see the love that still shone bright between them. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and it was just the two of them again, Cole took Caroline's hand and led her out to the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a nightingale sang somewhere in the darkness. 42 years, Cole said wonderingly. 42 years since we stood in that little church in Dodge City and promised to love each other forever. And you know what? It has not been long enough. I could have 100 years with you, and it still would not be enough. I feel the same way, Caroline said, leaning her head on his shoulder. But we have been so blessed, Cole. Look at everything we have, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this life. We have had so much love, so much joy. Not everyone gets that. No, Cole agreed, not everyone does, and I am grateful for every single day we have had together. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had spent a lifetime together and still enjoyed each other's company more than anyone else's. Eventually, Cole spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "Do you remember what I said to you that day in the storm, when you were hurt and scared and the hail was pounding down?" "You said to press my head against your chest," Caroline said immediately. "I will never forget that. It was the moment I felt safe again. The moment I knew I could trust you. That moment changed both our lives," Cole said. "It was the beginning of everything. And you know what? If I had it to do over again, I would not change a thing. I would ride out into that storm again, find you again, bring you close again, because it led to all of this, to us." "So would I," Caroline whispered. "I would endure that storm and 1,000 more if it meant finding you at the end of it." Cole pulled her close, and Caroline pressed her head against his chest, just as she had done the day so long ago. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, the same heartbeat that had comforted her through fear and pain and uncertainty, the same heartbeat that had been the soundtrack of her life for more than 4 decades. I love you, Caroline Coltrane, Cole said softly. Now and always. I love you too, James Coltrane, Caroline replied. Forever and always. They sat together under the stars, two souls who had found each other in the midst of a storm and had built a life together that was filled with love, purpose, and joy. Their children slept safely in their own homes nearby. Their grandchildren would visit again soon, bringing laughter and life. The ranch they had built together thrived under Sam's capable management. Everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, had come to fruition. As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Caroline thought about all the ways her life could have gone. She could have died in that hailstorm if Cole had not found her. She could have spent her life alone, working at the land office, scraping by. She could have married someone else, someone safe and practical who did not make her heart race. But instead, fate or luck or divine intervention had put her in that exact place at that exact time, and Cole had ridden into her life and changed everything. She thought about their wedding day, so simple but so full of love. She thought about the early days on the ranch, when they were building their dream one fence post at a time. She thought about the birth of their children, the pride and joy of watching them grow. She thought about all the quiet evenings on this porch, all the conversations and kisses and moments of simple contentment. She thought about how Cole looked at her, even now after all these years, like she was the most precious thing in his world. And she thought about how grateful she was, how incredibly blessed to have lived this life with this man. Some people went their whole lives without finding the kind of love she and Cole shared. Some people never experienced the deep partnership, the abiding friendship, the passionate romance that had characterized their marriage. But she had found it in the most unlikely of ways, on a stormy day when hail was falling and she had nowhere to hide. Cole stirred beside her, and she realized he had been having similar thoughts. "Do you think the grandchildren will believe our story?" he asked with a chuckle. "When we tell them about how we met, it sounds like something out of a dime novel." "They will believe it because it is true," Caroline said, "and because they can see the evidence all around them. This ranch, our family, the love we still share, that is all the proof anyone needs that sometimes miracles do happen, that sometimes love really does conquer all." "You are my miracle," Cole said, kissing her forehead. "My once-in-a-lifetime, struck by lightning, answered prayer miracle, and I thank God for you every single day." "And you are mine," Caroline replied, her voice thick with emotion. "My hero, my heart, my home." They remained on the porch until late into the night, reluctant to break the spell of this perfect evening. When they finally went inside, they climbed the stairs to their bedroom hand in hand, as they had done every night for 42 years. They paused before the painting Cole had commissioned, looking at the image of themselves in the midst of the storm, and exchanged a smile. "That was the best day of my life," Cole said, "the day I found you." "Mine too," Caroline agreed, "even with the hail and the fear and the pain, because it brought me to you." They prepared for bed with the ease of long practice, moving around each other comfortably in the space they had shared for so long. When they finally lay down together, Caroline curled into Cole's side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was the same position they slept in every night, the same position that brought her comfort and peace, that reminded her she was loved and safe and home. "Good night, my love," Cole murmured, his arms around her. "Good night, my darling," Caroline replied. They drifted off to sleep together, two hearts beating in tandem, two lives so deeply intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass, and the stars shone down on the ranch they had built, the legacy they were leaving, the love story that had begun with hail falling from the sky, and a cowboy who said to press your head against my chest. And it was good. It was all so very good. Years later, when the time came for each of them to leave this earth, they did so knowing they had lived fully and loved deeply, that they had built something meaningful and lasting, that they had found in each other the greatest treasure life had to offer. Their children and grandchildren mourned them, but also celebrated them, telling and retelling the story of how Caroline and Cole had met in a hailstorm and fallen in love in an instant, building a life and a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch they built still stood, passed down through their family. The love they shared still inspired those who knew their story. And somewhere in heaven, if there was such a place, Caroline and Cole were together still, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for every moment they had been given, every challenge they had overcome, every blessing they had received. Because in the end, that is what mattered most, not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or the money in the bank. What mattered was the love they had shared, the life they had built together, the family they had created, the way they had faced every storm, both literal and figurative, side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart. Their story became part of the family lore, told to each new generation. The children would gather around and listen wide-eyed as their parents or grandparents told them about the day hail was falling and Caroline had nowhere to hide, and how Cole had ridden up on his black stallion and told her to press her head against his chest. They would hear about the instant connection, the whirlwind courtship, the leap of faith it took to marry someone they had known for only weeks. They would hear about the hard early years, the gradual building of the ranch, the love that sustained them through everything. And the children would understand, as they grew older themselves, that Caroline and Cole's story was not just about romance or adventure. It was about partnership and perseverance, about choosing each other every single day, about building something meaningful together. It was about finding the person who made you better, who stood beside you through storms both literal and metaphorical, who loved you not, despite your flaws, but because of the complete package of who you were. The painting of that stormy day hung in the ranch house for generations, a reminder of where it all began. And sometimes, when the summer storms rolled across the prairie and hail fell from angry clouds, the members of the Coltrane family would think about their ancestors and smile, grateful for the storm that had brought Caroline and Cole together, grateful for the legacy of love they had left behind. Because that is what true love does. It does not just affect the two people who share it. It ripples outward, touching everyone around them, creating a legacy that outlasts the physical lives of those who built it. Caroline and Cole's love created a family, a ranch, a life that touched countless others. Their kindness and generosity, learned from each other and practiced together, made their corner of Kansas a better place. Their example of a strong, loving marriage gave their children and grandchildren a model to aspire to. This was their happily ever after. Not perfect, because life is never perfect, but real and true and lasting. A love born in a moment of crisis, tested by the hardships of frontier life, and proven over more than 4 decades of partnership and devotion. A love that began when Cole pulled Caroline onto his horse and told her to press her head against his chest, and that continued through all the days of their lives, strong and steady as his heartbeat, constant as the prairie wind, enduring as the land they had made their home. And in the end, is that not what we all hope for? To find someone who sees us at our most vulnerable and chooses to protect us? To build a life with someone we respect and admire and love with our whole heart? To create something meaningful together that outlasts our individual lives? To love and be loved so completely that even death cannot truly separate us because the love we shared lives on in the hearts and memories of those we leave behind? Caroline and Cole found all of that and more. They found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they built a love story for the ages. Their story proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that courage and kindness can lead to extraordinary outcomes, and that true love, once found, can weather any storm. The legacy they left was not just the ranch or the family name or the material wealth they accumulated. It was the example they set, the love they shared, the way they treated each other and everyone around them with respect and kindness. It was the proof that a good life is built not on grand gestures, but on small daily choices, on showing up for each other day after day, on choosing love over pride, partnership over independence, forever over fleeting. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would grow up hearing the story, and some would find their own versions of it, their own unexpected meetings and instant connections and lives built together. Others would search longer for their person, but they would never give up, because they knew from Caroline and Cole's example that true love was worth waiting for, worth working for, worth fighting for. And on summer days when storms rolled across the Kansas prairie, when clouds turned green and hail began to fall, the descendants of Caroline and Cole Coltrane would look up at the sky and remember. They would remember the day their family truly began, the day a scared young woman met a brave young cowboy, the day hail was falling and she had nowhere to hide, and he said to press her head against his chest. They would remember, and they would smile, and they would be grateful. Because love stories like Caroline and Cole's do not come along every day. But when they do, when two souls find each other and choose each other and build a life together filled with love and purpose and joy, they create something that transcends their individual lives. They create a legacy. They create hope. They create proof that despite all the hardship and difficulty and pain in the world, love is real, love is powerful, and love, in the end, is what matters most. This was the story of Caroline Miller and James Cole Coltrane, two people who met in a hailstorm and spent the rest of their lives grateful for the storm that brought them together. It was a story of courage and kindness, of partnership and perseverance, of love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was their story, unique to them, but also universal in its themes of finding love, building a life, and leaving a legacy. And it was a story with a happy ending because they lived their lives fully, loved each other deeply, raised their family well, and built something meaningful together. When the end came for each of them, they went peacefully, knowing they had lived well and loved truly, and those they left behind carried on, telling their story, honoring their memory, and striving to build the same kind of lasting love in their own lives. The hailstorm that brought them together was long past, but its effects echoed through the generations. Every member of the Coltrane family, every person whose life was touched by Caroline and Cole, carried a piece of their story forward, and in that way, their love never really ended. It transformed, it evolved, it spread outward, but it never died. It lived on in the ranch they built, in the family they created, in the example they set, in the love that continued to flourish in their wake. This was their legacy. This was their triumph. This was their happily ever after, earned through hard work and dedication, and a love that refused to be diminished by time or circumstance. They had found each other when hail was falling, and she had nowhere to hide, when he told her to press her head against his chest. And from that moment forward, they had built a life together that was worth celebrating, worth remembering, worth telling stories about for generations to come. They had loved deeply, lived fully, and left the world a better place than they found it. And in the end, that is all anyone can hope for.